you're talking about your diet, you have to talk about not just what to eat, but what not to eat. And our list of what not to eat has become incredibly long. Our society now is, our food has become so adulterated and so destroyed and so chemically altered that there's really, somebody said earlier, if your grandmother couldn't have given it to you, you probably shouldn't be eating it. So I've often said too, if you can't grow it in your own backyard, you probably shouldn't put it in your mouth. There's a huge difference between whole foods versus synthetic foods or processed foods. We all know on an intellectual level that processed foods are bad for us, but I don't think most of us know to the extent of how bad these processed foods are. Processed foods do not have any whole food nutrition left in them. They're dead chemical foods, and there have been great studies to prove how detrimental these chemicals are. I just wanted to talk about two quick studies. There was one done on rats, and for those of you who've heard me talk before, I've mentioned these studies before, but the one done on rats, they wanted to see how good fortified enriched cereal is. You know, so what we feed our children, right? So you go to the grocery store and you go to the cereal aisle and you see all these, you know, vitamin enriched fortified things that are supposed to be good for us to start the day. And don't quote me, I think they used Total Cereal, but I might have been one of the other ones. But they went and they picked the cereal that's supposed to be the healthiest. And they broke the rats into two groups. And they fed half the rats the cereal, and they fed the other half of the rats the box. The rats will eat the box when they're hungry enough. And at the end of the study, what they found was the ones who ate the cereal died first, and the ones who ate the box eventually did die from starvation. But the ones who ate the cereal died first. So the question is why? What happened to them? Well, when food is refined and enriched and fortified, it's denatured, destroyed, and filled with chemicals. So the refining process just simply means that they take a whole food, say a wheat grain, and they strip it of all of its nutrients. Hundreds and hundreds of nutrients, things that we haven't even yet identified, are stripped from that food. And then they spray chemicals back on it, synthetic chemicals that they call vitamins, and then they call it fortified or enriched. More and more research is showing that fortified and quote enriched foods, although they have a very pretty name, are not good for you. They are very detrimental to your health. There was another researcher who wanted to take this a little bit further, and so she did a similar study with dogs. And one group of dogs was fed whole grains, and normally dogs don't eat whole grains, but they actually survived and thrived and did okay. One group was fed refined grains, which again is all the nutrients were pulled out. And the third group was fed refined grains with fortified or enriched vitamins put on them. And the interesting thing was the ones that were fed the refined grains died of starvation. But the ones who were fed the refined grains that were enriched or fortified died of catastrophic diseases. So these things that when you see a fortified or an enriched food, it's not, again, they're pretty names, but it's not indicative of what's really going on. One of the reasons they refine foods is because it enhances its shelf life. I actually know this one doctor who practices in Missouri, and she has a Twinkie that she has kept in her cabinet in her kitchen. I think it's up to 15 years now, and it still looks exactly the same. So, you know, these foods, real foods, if you put an apple in your cabinet for 15 years, I think it'd just be gone, right? So you just can't compare them. But the other problem, too, is now they're not just refining them and stripping things out of them, but now they're putting stuff into them. And these are the things that are causing problems with weight, and they're causing problems with hormones, which is huge. And, you know, the funny thing is, women tend to react to these things faster than men, because we do not have a stable hormonal production. We tend to cycle up and down. We're more easily dysregulated than men are. So while it happens to men, it tends to take a little bit longer for them. But if we talk about the additives, let's look at the second page first. The first page, I'm sorry. I have it backwards. Let's look at MSG. Now, you know, I've said this to people, don't eat MSG, and I always get basically the same response, oh, I don't eat Chinese food. Well, there's probably less MSG in Chinese food than there is in McDonald's. So, you know, if we look at MSG, MSG is a synthetic version of an amino acid called glutamic acid. Glutamic acid it's just an amino acid, and when it hasn't been processed and chemically changed and altered, it's not bad for you. Glutamic acid it's just an amino acid. But, however, they process them, and so do you ever see the label that says, no MSG added? Well, you know, I always thought for a long time that's got to be safe. Well, you know what? It's not added, but there's already glutamic acid in there, and when they process it, it ends up turning into a form of MSG. So you're not necessarily safe with getting something that says no MSG added. MSG free would be a safer way. But here's a part that's kind of scary. If we look at our list, the FDA has made it legal to call MSG all these things. Glutamic acid, glutamate, monosodium glutamate, which we know about. The ones that I typically see when you read your labels are yeast extract, hydrolyzed soy protein, those are two of the most common, autolyzed yeast, gelatin is another form, soy protein, some names I've never heard of, and then things like natural flavors, seasonings, spices are all pseudo names for MSG, and milk solids, that was a new one for me, that kind of freaked me out. Cornstarch has MSG, and you can look through this list, it's really kind of crazy, but if you go through and you start reading your labels, you're going to find that this is in most of the food. MSG has been shown conclusively now in studies to, as we go to the second page, causes brain lesions, endocrine disturbances, causes obesity, reproductive disorders. I mean, it's not good stuff. So again, just to look at what you're eating, it's a really important part of changing your diet is to look at what the additives are in your food. The other thing are the artificial sweeteners. Have you ever had the experience where you go into some restaurant, and you see somebody that's got a weight issue and they order Diet Coke? Has anybody noticed that? Well, there's a part of me that always wants to go up to them and say, honey, just eat the sugar. But it's the diet sodas, any of the artificial sweeteners, will actually make you gain weight. It does the exact opposite. And it's not they say it doesn't cause you to gain weight because you don't have an insulin reaction. Well, it's not entirely true. There's a lot of perpetrated lies out there when it comes to what's in our food. But the bottom line is that, first of all, we know aspartame is horrible for us. I'm not going to beat that one up. That one it's established. They're trying to get it off the market. Splenda hasn't been around long enough for them to really say it's bad for us. But here's what we do know. Splenda is made from chlorine. Enough said, right? Not a good idea.